Welcome to another episode of Chaos Series Astrology. I'm Mark Harris. I'll be your host. This particular episode is number 4 and is an examination of a chart through traditional, modern, and Uranian techniques. Today I will be looking at the chart of my wife and touching on just a small part of the information that is available through astrology through these different approaches. I'm very happy that my wife was kind enough to participate in this with me, and I look forward to continuing other videos of this nature, along with studies of a variety of subjects, events, nativities of various people, famous or otherwise, and examine other methods or approaches as time permits. I hope you enjoy this video. Hello and welcome to another episode of Chaos Series Astrology on YouTube. I'm here with my wife, Deborah Shaw Harris, and she has kindly consented to joining me on this, and I want to give you a warm welcome, Deborah.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. One of the first things that we cover in the charts of individuals is the traditional modern chart. And because Uranian uses whole sign for their house system, which I will cover in a later video, I start with whole sign on the traditional modern chart. There's a very interesting layout here with a lot of different planets. I've used the Uranian planets and some of the others like Chiron and Trans-Pluto on this whole sign chart, and this adds an additional layer of information in the 360-degree chart. There are lots of things that are involved here that is very interesting. For instance, we have the node of connections along with Chiron in the 3rd house of communication, opposite Uranus in the 9th house. So, what we can assume here is that this native will have connections to healing in unusual teaching or perhaps energy work or in astrology. Since Uranus rules astrology in the Uranian system especially, as opposed to what Robert Hand says of Mercury being the ruler in the traditional, which I agree with on the traditional methods. We can see that this will be an important axis in the life. There's a lot of other things going on here. We see over here the Mars conjunction with Saturn. The Mars conjunction with Saturn in the 1st house, normally it has a lot of different possible meanings. In Uranian astrology, one of the important meanings of Mars-Saturn in contacts as midpoints and things like that has to do with death of the native. This is because Saturn obstructs or ends, and Mars refers to activity, and death as an end of activity is an apt symbol for that. However, there are several other different manifestations of the Mars-Saturn combination, such as determined action that is well thought out and structured, Also in the first house.
Also, so long-term plans will work out too, since Saturn has to do with that.
Absolutely. In the first house of the physical body, in this whole sign house chart, we would see that there are also indications for muscle issues, because Mars is associated with musculature, and Saturn can be associated with obstruction or problems on working or stress and things like that. So we would assume there'd be muscular pain somewhere in the body.
Yeah, if I get a lot of stress, I do get muscle tension, which makes sense in the first house. It never made sense in the 12th. Not to mention how bold and
well, you mean in the Placidus first
in the Placidus 12. Yeah, in the Placidus, Mars and Saturn is in the 12th house. But that never made sense, because you know how bold and outgoing I am, and you know, and how assertive and how I can stand up to just about anything. That never made sense in the 12th house. But in the first house, it does, along with how it is in the body with stress.
And you've had a lot of back pain, muscular pain in your back?
Yeah, it's usually in my back if it's stress. I'll get tense muscles.
Over here, we have Jupiter in conjunction with Volcanos. Okay, these two planets together in combination would suggest mighty luck. Opposite from these is Venus and Mercury. We have a polarity between Gemini and Sagittarius. Jupiter combinations with Venus are also associated with luck, and the Mercury is with that is fortunate plans, fortunate talking, fortunate thoughts, and this is manifested in the second house, which would suggest fortunate plans for making money through the life.
Well, it makes sense with the luck. I've always relied on my luck, because I'm lucky in a number of ways, and it's been consistent through my life. And so you add that to me with my Mars Saturn, never thinking I'll fail when I start on a course of action. I always think I won't fail, and if I run into a problem, I'll reason it out, I'll figure it out, and if not, I will lucky fluke it, because I am really lucky that way.
That is good.
I've always relied on that through hard times, that those kind of things always work for me.
The midheaven here floating in the 11th house would suggest being fortunate with groups, and it is conjunct in degree with Apollon, the Uranian planet, having to do with honor, far and wide thoughts, would be appropriate match here. Expansive nature, and being able to, in the 11th house, work with groups.
And that's all true. I've worked with groups, and I get along well with authorities. I've even had authorities listen to me to change systems and the way they do things, and they've gone out of their way to help me numbers of times.
That is awesome. We have that in the opposition between the ascendant and Kronos, having to do with authorities. That would also make sense of contact with them, and because of the great luck axis here being filled, there would be quite a bit of good fortune expressed in that as well.
That is very true.
I'm going to go ahead and change to the 90 dial. First, I'm going to show you the 360 dial. That'll be a bridge on this. All astrology is based on angular interrelationships between planets and points and different objects in the chart. One of the main things is the axis of the equinoctial points and the solstitial points. And here we have Cancer, and we have a midpoint between Hades and Zeus, which suggests leadership in analysis. For one thing, that's one of the good manifestations. It is on the axis combined with the Sun in midpoint with Venus, and that's very fortunate. We have the 90-degree dial chart of Deborah Shaw Harris, and we can see a lot of combinations of planets, including the midheaven and Mercury. We've got Uranus and Admetos over here, Kronos and Pluto here. A lot of different things here. Venus and Vulcanos, that's really nice. So we can also put in the formulas that I have examined here for Deborah and look at a lot of different things that are going on during her lifetime. Every one of these crossbars between formulas, between midpoints, between planets, when the pointer is at a personal point like Aries, will count and help to describe different factors of the person's life. We have, in this case, Aries Poseidon in midpoint, in a complex midpoint with the ascendant and the node, and one other. Let's look at this a little bit better. That is Uranus plus Zeus minus what appears to be Kronos. Okay, we'll look over here. Uranus plus Zeus. No, it is minus Venus, harmonizing the forces of nature. Okay, so what we have, general spirituality and ideas having to do with harmonizing the forces of nature and connection with others. There is Vulcanus here and Venus, and you have over here the midpoint of the moon and Saturn. So moon and Saturn can be associated with the nighttime hours, and all this on Aries, known to the general world, suggests that you might be working with groups of people and doing some sort of energy work or healing, something like that.
Done that in my life, that's for sure. I'm also a trained hypnotherapist.
Mm-hmm. And we have Moon and Cupido over here on this midpoint, which is in a complex midpoint with Poseidon, which suggests spirituality involved in working with a group setting.
I've done that too.
And all this is kind of combining into the same general idea. We have Jupiter here, opposite vertex here, showing the midpoint line. So that also connects to Aries, known to the general world, having to do with fated good fortune or good luck. And down here we have the moon and Neptune, which might suggest images that connect to the public, which suggests
Well, I
perhaps
do
what we're
make my
doing.
videos to YouTube, and I'm making the video here with you too.
So
Yeah.
that would also be involved in this lifetime, as shown in the general world. Didn't you tell me a couple of times about this one person who commented that she would just turn on your illuminating videos and listen?
I've had a couple different people tell me that. They
And
would
that-
just listen when they were going through a hard time because they found it comforting,
So even
which
without
surprised me.
even without the intention, the energy is coming through for helping people, and that is a really interesting thing. All right.
And animals too.
Mm-hmm.
Animals flock to me.
And over here we have Mars, which is a complex midpoint with Mars Jupiter midpoint of fortunate action, and also we have the connection to the ascendant. Continuing on, we have Mars in a complex midpoint with the Mars midpoint of Jupiter and the ascendant. All these things together combines the energies of all these different midpoints, and they all kind of contribute to the general picture of the native as far as what is known to the general world, indicated by the registry point Aries. In this case, the Mars-Jupiter midpoint of fortunate action, which is right on top of the ascendant, having to do with other people, across from Mars of activity, goes with this Venus, Volcanos midpoint, and the presence of the planets themselves, and the moving of energy fields or harmonious work with forces of nature in combination with the work at night and the fortunate healing type energies of the
Well, that
Chiron
makes a lot of sense because
combination with Jupiter.
yeah, I've been involved in those kind of different healing modalities, and also hypnotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So
You said that the relationship of Jupiter and Chiron had a lot to do with that.
well, in the one of the astrologers, and I can't remember which one, that wrote a book about Chiron, said that Chiron in conjunct Jupiter has to do with moving energy fields.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I heard that.
So Chiron
But you're
here?
seeing it. You're seeing it in other
and Jupiter here.
places in Uranian.
Right. So what we were doing is we're seeing the interactivity between the traditional modern chart and the Uranian chart and how they're reinforcing each other. That's a great thing. It always works like that. The traditional modern format 360 reinforces the Uranian charts, the dial charts, and the dial charts magnify the information, kind of like a magnifying glass on the traditional, while the traditional format, all those interrelationships serve to delimit and focus the possible delineations of any planetary picture or combination formula in the Uranian. They work together to focus the information about the native. So we have worked with the Aries registry point of what is known to the general world. Let's move on to the midheaven. Midheaven shows here two complex midpoints, or well, one midpoint and some complex midpoints, moon and vertex, and you have with the midheaven Mercury of communication, working with people, the public, or with female persons, which seems to be a fated situation with the vertex. The sun of the physical body is involved in this picture. It is all dot to the midheaven and Mercury combination, suggesting physical involvement with this communication. And down here we have a complex midpoint between Neptune, which is on dot again to the midheaven Mercury. So communication seems to be able to occur easily through images or videos, since Neptune does have to do with that. All right, we have
Okay, well,
over
it's
here.
very true, and I enjoy making my videos too. I have fun making them.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
We have here two midpoints that I've plotted out. Venus, Poseidon, which is very fortunate for spirituality and things like that, religion, favored ideas. And we have Vulcanos combined with Poseidon, which suggests mighty inspiration and force of spirituality. And this is all combined on this midpoint axis.
It all makes sense for me too.
Mm-hmm. Saturn here does not obstruct, but structures instead. The entire combination suggests that Saturn would play the function here of planning and a structured approach.
I have always found that.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people say that when Mars conjuncts Saturn, you can have all kinds of trouble, and even trouble with authorities, but not, I've had the exact opposite of that. I don't have any trouble. In fact, they go out of their way to help me. And my Mars and Saturn does work together, and it got better the older I got, as I used Mars more for structuring than I did for restriction.
Well, that's very cool. Okay, back to Nova.
So that makes a lot of sense that in the Uranian chart it shows structuring.
Yeah. All this works so harmoniously and gives so many interesting details to an astrological analysis.
Well, that's why I'm so excited about Uranian. I've been learning it because it just shows so much more and with more clarity and depth.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at the sun. All right, here we have the physical body of the sun in Uranian. I know that it does not delineate that way in the traditional chart. There are differences in the scale of astrology that you're using. When you change from the 360 traditional scale to the Uranian dials, there are different delineational meanings that are associated with the planets and points used in those dials. It is what it is, and it works very well, in fact. Okay, we have that mighty spirituality and mighty ideas in combination with the religion and favored ideas, in a general sense of harmoniousness to this overall combination on the sun axis.
Well, that makes sense. My mother was an atheist, but that didn't stop me from feeling that everything was connected somehow, and that I had faith in the universe, and that I would be taken care of by the universe somehow. or God or spirit, whatever you want to call it. I've just always felt that way.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and a way I couldn't explain even.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
The moon,
before I had words for it even.
Well, that's good. The moon in combination here on midpoint is with Mars, and that suggests activity with the public or with several persons. With these midpoints we previously discussed involved.
Yep, and of course many times I've ended up teaching groups or being a leader, or and I usually don't try to do that. I usually I'm doing something and I'm good at it, and then people want me to teach. I don't know if I've ever decided I'm going to do a certain thing without it coming to me first. I don't think so. It comes to me first.
We have another complex midpoint of Jupiter with Cupido, another delineation of fortunate with groups, in complex combination with the midpoint of Mars Jupiter of fortunate. All right, we are talking about the Sun axis. We've already spoken about the activity with groups of people or several persons with the Moon Mars midpoint.
Yeah.
We have the Venus Poseidon and Vulcanos Poseidon midpoints here on this axis, and we are on dot with Neptune, which again in this case refers to images or sometimes intuition and other helpful things in this particular chart. Okay, going on to the ascendant, which is our next registry point. We have a combination of Mars, Jupiter, as we have spoken about before, and we have midheaven and Mercury in complex midpoint with Hades. Hades has a bad reputation in most delineations, but it also refers to investigation and analysis, taking things apart. That's part of Hades' nature. We have further a complex midpoint between the Aries ascendant midpoints. Let's see, having to do with locations, fortunate locations, and that might be forced into the situation, such as changes of residence and things like that. We have the Cupido Kronos midpoint, which might have to do with groups of authority figures. And over here we have the ascendant node midpoint connections with others, and the harmonious harmonious unfoldment of energies and harmonizing the forces of nature. Further on, also on this ascendant axis, we have Cupido again, which is in midpoint with Admetos. So this would reduce the size of the groups that you're dealing with in personal situations, like for instance the local community, your neighbors, or what have you. This is connected with, on the Admetos position, with Uranus, which again can refer to astrology or other Uranus-ruled interests and delineations.
Well, certainly astrology. From the very first time I saw anything about astrology, I felt somehow like I'd done it all my life, or it seemed familiar in some ways. And when I was a teenager, all my friends had rock star posters on their walls. I had a whole wall of astrology paraphernalia.
That's really great.
always had an interest in it. And I started by just looking at the energies that were the same. Like my mother was an Aquarius, my best friend was an Aquarius, and I would feel and see how they were the same. What was the same about them?
Mm-hmm.
And I would start to understand what the energy is. And as I put in the rising sign and the moon, and I started doing that when I was quite young, around 14, I started to see a lot more. And it was some years later when I started looking at all the planets and the whole chart. But yes, always had an interest in astrology.
That's a wonderful childhood to have.
Well, yeah, because you're an astrologer, you think that. Not everyone has always thought that, but it didn't matter. I just liked my astrology.
Okay, now we're referring to the moon of the public and public situations. It also rules other things like the mother and things like that. But in this case, what we're looking at is a combination between Aries and trans-Pluto, which is very interesting. I am still researching what trans-Pluto does in the Uranian format, so I can talk about it. But I've noticed that it is important in formulas having to do with personal points on people and events. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that. I've asked all kinds of different astrologers about what that means in the Uranian format, those that practice Uranian, and I can't get any information at all. So that's very curious. We have Saturn on midpoint with Cupido, which might refer to structured teaching of groups of people. And we have over here Moon plus Apollon minus Node, which is a three-part formula. Connections with many people, which refers to your YouTube channel, I believe. And opposite that is Aries, Poseidon of spirituality, Moon, Saturn of night hours, and the Jupiter Chiron of healing.
Well, we certainly know that I worked a lot at night hours, and I certainly am a night person.
Mm-hmm. Which is why we're doing this video at almost 1 in the morning.
Oh,
that's great.
That's early.
The night is young. Okay, we've got another midpoint here of Mercury Chiron, which is across from Hades, which might be having to do with healing of the sick or healing of people's afflictions,
hypnotherapy,
stress and things like that. Hypnotherapy.
I've also worked with animals. I tend to have a healing effect or understand what they need.
That's very cool. Very, very cool. All right, another registry point, node of connections. I have Chiron with the Cupido Chronos midpoint. Authority in groups having to do with healing. And we have Aries with the Venus, Poseidon, and Vulcanos, Poseidon midpoints in a complex configuration. And we have lots of stuff had to do with the midheaven, Mercury, connected with formulas having to do with working with people and fortunate action. Plus Apollon minus Cupido, group of many people, common peaceful endeavors. Has to do also with Kronos, which is here. So that would configure to this connection axis. A lot of interesting stuff in this chart. It really is a very, very interesting configuration. Okay, for our last registry point, the vertex in this chart, we see over here the Venus Vulcanos combination which is in complex midpoint with Neptune. Fortunate or mighty desired communications. That is there, so that will work. Neptune would refer to images again. This is all faded because that's what vertex means. And we have another midpoint of Aries with the ascendant, which has to do with people and locations. And Mars is across from Moon Cupido, which talks about public halls and gatherings of people. That's very nice.
Yeah, that all makes sense too. All of this makes sense.
And it also is a strong aura. But at any rate, you see how much detail the combination of the traditional modern chart format and the Uranian dials can provide to the practice of astrology in the analysis of natives and natives' lives.
Oh yeah, and we just did the surface. There's
This
still a
is the
lot more
surface.
formulas there to look at.
There are thousands of formulas in the Uranian charts. And
Plus, most of this was my good stuff. You haven't dug up any dirt yet.
we have not covered any of the more challenging formulas and aspects and things like that.
We'll get to them though.
We'll get to those. But at any rate, this is a good place to stop on this analysis. And I hope all you viewing this video have enjoyed my presentation and been able to follow along. There's a lot more that I will be covering going forward with not only charts of persons but also charts of various events.